There's a moment every craftsman knows. You open a drawer, a toolbox, a forgotten cabinet in the garage can, and there it is. A wrench, a chisel, a plane blade, a handsaw, something your grandfather bought or something you spent real money on, now wearing a thick coat of rust, the color of dried blood. And your first instinct is either to throw it away or spend $20 on a spray can that promises to fix everything.
But here's what nobody tells you. That spray can is not fixing anything. It's masking it. And the tool you're about to throw away could be restored
Completely to working condition pod for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. Not with a miracle product, not with expensive equipment, with a compound that professional workshops have been quietly using for over 100 years, and that the industrial cleaning market has spent the last few decades making sure you forget exists. What you're about to hear isn't a life hack. It's not a trick. It's the recovery of a technique that was once common knowledge in every serious workshop in the world, until it became inconvenient for the people who profit from your rust problem, never being truly solved. Think about how many tools you've thrown away in your life. Think about the ones sitting in your garage right now. Too far gone to use, too valuable to discard. A good set of chisels can cost $80, $100, sometimes $200. A vintage hand plane in decent condition sells for the same. A quality wrench set that belonged to someone's father, something with real weight and real history, is gone because nobody told you there was a better way. And even the people who do try to save their tools usually end up making the same mistake. They reach for the wrong solution, waste time, damage the metal surface, and end up with tools that look worse than before they started. The rust removal industry is worth billions of dollars globally. Billions, and it is built almost entirely on the premise that you don't know what professional restorers, serious machinists, and old-school craftsmen have known for generations. The products on the shelf, the aerosol sprays, the gel treatments, the brand-name rust converters, most of them work by one of two methods. Either they use phosphoric acid to chemically convert rust into a black iron phosphate layer that can be painted over, or they use abrasive chemistry that physically scours the oxide off the surface, taking a layer of the base metal with it. Neither of these is what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is something older, cleaner, and far more precise. The compound is called oxalic acid. And if you've never heard of it, that's exactly the point. Oxalic acid is not exotic. It occurs naturally in dozens of plants: rhubarb, spinach, wood sorrel. It appears in the cells of those plants as a byproduct of metabolic processes, a crystalline salt that gives certain vegetables their sharp, slightly bitter edge. But in its purified crystalline form, dissolved in warm water, it becomes one of the most effective and gentle rust removal agents ever identified. And unlike most commercial rust removers, it doesn't attack the iron underneath the rust, it attacks only the rust itself. That distinction sounds small, it is not. To understand why that matters, you have to understand what rust actually is. When iron is exposed to oxygen and moisture, it undergoes oxidation that converts the surface metal into iron oxide. The most common form is ferrous oxide, a reddish-brown compound that sits on top of the base metal, but also penetrates slightly into its surface layer. The problem with most rust removal methods is that they either stop at the surface, leaving oxidized material embedded in the metal, or they go too deep, dissolving not just the rust but also the clean iron beneath it. Wire brushing does the first. Strong acids like hydrochloric acid do the second. Both leave you with a tool that's been compromised. Oxalic acid does something different.
When you dissolve it in water TAMV, typically around 25 to 30 grams per liter of warm water, around 40 to 50 degrees Celsius,
and submerge a rusted tool in that solution, a specific chemical reaction begins. The oxalic acid molecules bind to the iron ions in the ferrous oxide, forming a compound called iron oxalate. And here is the critical part. Iron oxalate is water-soluble. It simply dissolves away into the solution. The rust doesn't get scraped, it doesn't get neutralized into a new coating. It literally disintegrates and floats off the metal surface, leaving behind only the clean iron below. No loss of material, no damage to edges, threads, or precision surfaces, just clean metal. I want you to really understand what that means for a craftsman. It means that a plane blade with a perfect factory bevel pallet, a bevel that took decades of use and careful sharpening to achieve, it can come out of an oxalic acid bath with that geometry completely intact. It means that the threads on a bolt or a tap, which can be destroyed by mechanical scrubbing or etched away by aggressive acids, survive the process untouched. It means that a cast iron hand plane body, with its machined reference surfaces and its carefully maintained flatness, can be restored without the risk of removing thousandths of an inch from the metal. For precision tools, that's not a small thing. That's everything. Now here's the question that should be forming in your mind right now. If this works so well, why don't more people know about it? The answer to that question begins in the early 20th century.
In industrial workshops and machine shops across Europe and North America, oxalic acid was widely available, inexpensive.
It was used by furniture restorers to remove rust stains from wood without bleaching the grain. It was used by textile workers to remove iron-based dye stains from fabric.
And it was used by machinists and tool sharpeners who needed to restore cutting tools without compromising their geometry. In the 1920s and 1930s,
it was a standard item in professional shop supplies, listed alongside linseed oil, Japan dryer, and lapping compound. There are records of naval maintenance crews using oxalic acid solutions to treat iron fittings on British warships during the First World War.
Specifically because it could clean surface rust from anchor chains, deck hardware, and below waterline iron without weakening the metal or requiring the components to be removed from service.
the Royal Navy's engineering manuals from that period referenced dilute oxalic acid as a standard maintenance treatment, appropriate for iron
or where precision tolerances had to be preserved. This was not secret knowledge. It was documented, tested, institutionally endorsed, and passed down through apprenticeships in workshops on both sides of the Atlantic. Then the second half of the 20th century arrived, and with it came the age of the branded industrial product. Between 1950 and 1980, the industrial chemical market underwent a transformation that most consumers were never meant to notice. Trademarked chemistries and patented delivery systems began systematically replacing generic compounds in professional and consumer maintenance. A kilogram of oxalic acid crystals costs, in today's market, somewhere between $3 and $8, depending on the supplier. It can treat dozens of tools. A single can of a branded rust remover costs $12 to $25 and treats a fraction of that volume. The profit margin is not a coincidence. It is the business model. What happened to oxalic acid was not a dramatic suppression. There was no conspiracy meeting in a boardroom where executives agreed to erase it from public knowledge. What happened was slower, more mundane, and in some ways more effective than any deliberate campaign. It simply stopped being taught. The apprenticeship culture that had transmitted this practical knowledge from craftsman to craftsman, from father to son in workshops and garages and trade schools,
was gradually replaced by a consumer culture where the default answer to any maintenance problem was a product you could buy. When a new generation of hobbyists and DIY practitioners inherited their tools, they inherited them without the vocabulary to maintain them properly. And the market was waiting, fully stocked, to fill that gap.
By the early 2000s, if you searched for rust removal advice, the results were dominated by sponsored content, product reviews, and affiliate marketing for branded removers. The few voices still recommending oxalic acid were found in corners of the internet that casual searchers rarely reach. Vintage tool restoration forums, blacksmithing communities.
Antique machinery groups, places where knowledge is still transmitted by practice rather than advertising. And within those communities, the people who knew about oxalic acid
didn't call it a discovery. They called it just the way things were done. I want to be honest with you here, because the full picture matters.
Oxalic acid is not magic, and it is not without limitations. It works exceptionally well on ferrous oxide, the common reddish rust that forms on iron
and steel in normal conditions. It is less effective on magnetite, the black iron oxide that forms under scale or in low oxygen environments.
And it won't do much for deeply pitted rust where the metal itself has been structurally compromised. If a tool has rust that is eaten through to holes,
oxalic acid won't rebuild what's been lost. No chemical will. And oxalic acid, like any acid, requires basic safety precautions: gloves, good ventilation, proper disposal of the spent solution, which will contain dissolved iron compounds and should not go directly down a drain in large quantities. It is not dangerous in casual use.
It's the way strong mineral acids are, but it is not something to handle without awareness. What it is, in the range of situations where it does apply,
is remarkably effective. More effective in practice than most people who haven't used it would believe. Here is exactly how the process works. You take a plastic container,
a bin, a bucket, a food storage container large enough to hold your tool. You heat water to roughly 45 to 50 degrees Celsius, hot tap water,
or a brief run in the microwave. You dissolve the oxalic acid crystals in that water at a concentration of about 25 to 30 grams per liter.
Roughly 2 tablespoons per quart if you're working in imperial. You stir until fully dissolved. You submerge the rusted tool completely, making sure no part is exposed
to air above the waterline. And then you wait. Depending on the severity of the rust, the process takes anywhere from 30 minutes to 24 hours.
For light surface rust on a quality tool, an hour is usually enough. For heavier oxidation that has been building for years, an overnight soak produces dramatic results. You'll see the solution turn a golden brown color as the iron oxalate compounds dissolve into it. That color change is the rust leaving the metal. When you pull the tool out, you rinse it thoroughly with clean water, dry it immediately and completely, and then apply a thin coat of oil, linseed, mineral oil, or a dedicated tool preservative to protect the freshly cleaned surface. What you'll see underneath the rust is exactly what was there before the oxidation began.
Clean iron, with all its texture, geometry, and character preserved. There's something almost startling about seeing it for the first time. You've been conditioned by years of disappointing results from products that sand the surface flat, leave a black residue that comes off on your hands, or require so much scrubbing that you're essentially doing the work yourself. Oxalic acid does none of that. It does chemistry. And chemistry, when it's the right chemistry for the job, is more precise than any amount of mechanical effort. The old craftsman understood something that the modern maintenance market has worked hard to obscure. The best solution
to most workshop problems is the one that works with the material rather than against it. Iron rusts because of a chemical process. Reverse that process chemically with a targeted compound that attacks the oxidation and spares the base metal, and you don't fight the rust, you dissolve it. The tool underneath was never gone.
It was just buried. Think about what that means at scale. Every vintage hand plane sitting in an antique store, priced low because of surface rust, is potentially
A high-performance tool waiting to be recovered. Every inherited socket set, every old draw knife, every cast iron vise with surface oxidation that makes it look unusable,
all of it is a candidate. The knowledge required to restore any of it costs virtually nothing. A pound of oxalic acid crystals, which is enough to treat dozens of tools multiple times, is available online or at hardware stores for around $4 to $8. The container is something you already have. The water comes from your tap. The entire investment is measured in pocket change, and the return is measured in decades. Of functional tools that someone spent real money on and real skill using. There is a broader truth underneath this story, and it's one worth sitting with.
The industrial economy of the last century was extraordinarily good at one specific thing, replacing common knowledge with purchased solutions. There are hundreds of areas of daily life
where this same pattern appears. A maintenance task that a previous generation handled with a simple, inexpensive material has been replaced by a branded product that costs 10,
20, 50 times as much and works no better, and sometimes works worse. The tools in your garage are just one example. The pattern is everywhere. But the knowledge hasn't disappeared. It went quiet. It survived in the margins, in workshop manuals from the 1940s, in trade publications that nobody scans and uploads, in the memories of old machinists who learned their craft before the branded chemical era began. And increasingly, it's being recovered by restorers, by craftsmen, by people who still believe that understanding a problem is more powerful than purchasing a solution to it, by people who open a rusted tool and see not garbage,
but a recoverable instrument that someone made with care and that still has decades of use left in it. You can be one of those people. The knowledge is yours now, not borrowed from a product label, not dependent on a subscription or a special formulation that only one company makes.
Just chemistry, water, and the patience to let the reaction do its work. A crystalline powder, warm water, a few hours of time. That's all it takes to reach across the corrosion, past the neglect, through the years of abandonment in a damp garage, and pull back something that was made to last, made to work, made to be passed on. The workshops of the past knew this. The craftsmen who built the tools you're holding right now, the ones who sharpened them and oiled them and expected them to outlast several lifetimes, they knew this. And somewhere in the part of you that recognizes quality,
when you hold it in your hands, you already knew that a tool this well made couldn't be beyond saving. Now you know how to save it.